Hey guys, so our play Where I Wanna Be is adapted from the movie Hairspray, and the historical background of this movie is settled in 1960s in Baltimore in America. And I think this movie concerns with a lot of different issues such as bullying, global warming, and obesity. And I think it delivered in a rather cheerful and I would say carnival-like way. I think this movie is a package of collective memories of Black people in the 20th century. So I think the most significant issue the movie brought up is racial equality. So today we are going to dig into that topic with our professor and let's get started. So as I just mentioned, the movie Hairspray is settled in 1960s in Baltimore. And this historical background is actually quite important. Baltimore is a city that its population is consisted of like about 64% of black popularity, I think. And also 1960s is also a crucial era of the civil rights movement. So speaking of that, like racial equality and civil rights movement, I immediately think of the speech "I Have a Dream" by Dr. Martin Luther King. So yes, can you talk about its significance?
Well, Dr. Martin Luther King, whenever talking about human rights, all the attentions immediately go to Dr. Martin Luther King. I think it's somehow too convenient. This convenience is quite natural as we are talking about independence of the United States. We always give the credit to Washington and Franklin. But I personally think it's quite absurd to know Martin Luther King and know Martin Luther King only without have a overview on how human rights evolutions of human rights in like United States in 20th century. But yeah, I quite agree with you that 1960 was really a magical decade. Particularly in that 10 years, there are so many important, significant events really took place in that 10 years. But here I'm not talking about the termination of Nazi or the finish of World War II, but the abolishment of most, I personally think, the most terrifying, the most discriminating, and most disgusting law that has really took place. And yeah, namely the Jim Crow law. And I have to say that I don't really deny the importance of Dr. Martin Luther King, especially his speech in 1963. I have a dream really become a wake up call for the rise of human rights and later civil rights movements. But I think there should be a lot more.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And you just mentioned about Jim Crow law. And
Yeah.
can you talk more about that if you consider that such an like important historical event?
Okay, if you have no idea about Jim Crow law, it sounds like a law that's made by Jim Crow, but actually it's not so. Jim Crow is actually only a metaphor, and we better start from who Jim Crow is, okay? Jim Crow is actually a physical black protagonist that has been made for a spatial political purposes. It's pretty much like Bowen Ye show in like 8032, and the purpose is going to make fun of the Hanguo or whatever. But the target at that moment is going to make sneers on Andrew Jackson and his populism. Okay, but unexpectedly, this character has become quite popular by its image that the player who was a white man tried to make fun on its exaggerating vulgar movements and so Brooklyn ways of accents and slangs. So Jim Crow since that moment has become a symbol of hierarchically lower status in the United States. So we must understand that the term Jim Crow was never a compliment. And just opposite, it can be seen as an insult to those kind of Negro people who undertaking very low wages and salaries and do a lot of sweatshop works. Okay, so if we try to see how Jim Crow law take place, we should somehow have an overview of how black slavery has been banned in the United States. And just in fact, if we have a timeline in our minds, there's very important historical events, a period called Civil War. Do you know that? It has been taking place like 1961 to 1965. And in 1963, a very important person, President Abraham Lincoln, has mentioned, has provided declarations on, we called it abolitionism, in which officially this black slavery has forever banned from the United States. Okay, so in 1865, when the Civil War officially over, the army from the north of America, the whole country, take the ruler of all countries, and so it can be natural for the people in the South to stay with those they used to be slaves, but nowadays they are citizens, and they are supposed to live with them in harmoniously life, which they don't feel happy about that at all. So there's a huge anxiety in the societies everywhere, and humiliations and discrimination as well. Many states in the United States since then create some laws that try to segregate the colored people, especially African Americans, from white neighborhoods or white communities. Okay, so Jim Crow law is not just a law, but the kind of bundle of laws that they try to separate. They try to make people who hate Negro people or integration of different races feel more comfortable in the society. One example, you probably have no idea about that, but in 1930, I believe, in Pittsburgh, you can even imagine that in order to enter a public swimming pool, a black person, they need to provide valid certificate or proofs of their personal health. And that health is not going to be provided by the clinic, but the public, the big formal hospital. So it's not just about the personal, it's not questions about personal hygiene or whatever. It's always an issue, it's a human thing. So yeah, still, and there are a lot of, there's another case you probably know about. Do you know Rosa Parks? Yeah, if you are an expert of Dr. Martin Luther King and whatever he has been doing, you must know this girl. This woman. Okay, sorry. This woman herself was not just a radical activist of human rights. She was also the cause of Montgomery bus boycotts in 1955. Okay, if you're curious about this plot summary, the story pretty much like one day a lawful girl who was sitting in the bus and in a color sections, and she was arrested because on that day the white section in the bus was filled, so the passenger was fine, no seats on the bus anywhere, the white passengers. So the bus drivers, they just go forward to Rosa Parks and ask her to offer the seats to the white passenger simply because there is no other seats. And of course, Parks rejected, and the bus driver called the police and arrested her. And she was taking her famous photo is like she's holding some kind of a sport card and writing on like 7053 in front of her. And there was like a symbolic numbers of freedoms and equality afterwards. And these events become so important and so supportive evidences to resistance of racial segregation ever since. And Rosa Parks herself also become the symbol of international icons of like human rights, and has devoted the majority of her life into like the civil rights movement as well.
Okay, and we've known about like all the segregation thing, the swimming pool and the Rosa Park and everything. And I believe that the Jim Crow law was officially abolished in like 1965,
Yes.
and the timing of Hairspray is located in 1962, I believe.
Mhm.
And does it mean that 60s as well as the musical, and was the prologue or the celebration of equality and happiness?
I really hope so. But if there is anything, George Floyd, the man we know as like gentle black giants, and the movement of Black Lives Matters have have somehow reminded us any message, and that would be that we're still so far from the real equality and freedom. Ironically speaking, there has been already like 50 years since the abolishment of Jim Crow law, but apparently there are still like tragedies and cries or Negroes and whatever inequality take place every day, not just in the United States but in the whole world. You probably might think that Taiwan, we are just thousands of miles from where Hairspray and Jim Crow laws really take place, but actually we do have the same problem as well. Just imagine that the new immigrants, 新住民, and the native people, 原住民, and some even more vulnerable groups like homosexuals. I think that still we are still far from the real equality, but I would rather try to see everything up positively as remember 3 years ago this month, Taiwan has officially become the first country that legalized same-sex marriage. Yes, and that is indeed a great step in the improvement of human rights. If I need to make a conclusion, it might be yeah, there are still rooms to be improved. The whole world is improving, is changing somehow. If we go back to the play, the Hairspray, so if I make it right, till last year, there have been already like 9 versions of Hairspray in different genres like books, movies, musicals, and graduation shows. And it has been around everywhere. And whenever Hairspray have played once, I think the most important and more meaningful information that play convey is not just because it's quite happy and carnival-like atmosphere, we are celebrating something, but the more important message is that these events we do care and we never forget. Okay, so yeah, I personally admire you have tried to see this so challenging task to take Hairspray as your graduation show. And I heard that you have personally prepared like 7 songs and 7 dances for the show.
Yes.
Okay, wow. So when is that going to be?
It's going to be played in um on December 8th and December 10th.
Wow, that's about less than half a year.
Yes.
Okay, so go for it. And before ending, I have a personal question for you. Since
Yes.
you asked me to, I return one. Okay.
Yes.
I read the playwright last night, and I
Yes.
noticed that there's something because in the opening of today's interview, you mentioned that obesity and human rights are all important issues regarded by the Hairspray.
Yes.
I see some adjustment. You somehow you move away part of the Negro and obesity from Tracy Turned Black. Can I
Yes.
know why?
I think that yes, discrimination, Negro, obesity is yes, there are issues. There are significant issues, and however, just like the musical Jim Crow you just talked about, if we try to like dress up ourselves like Negro or obesity, it will be like try
Another
to
Jim Crow.
yeah, and
Okay.
I would consider it as an insult, and that would be quite sad, and it will be like a violation of our original intention is that we care about discrimination. We don't want to deliver it that way.
I'm more than happy to hear that you're sensitive enough to recognize this part, and I am more than hungry to see how you fulfill it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for attending this conference. It is such an honor that I can discuss such a significant issue with you.
Okay.
And also, thanks for watching.
Oh, hi. Bye bye.